So today we're going to talk about removing wire. There's a lot of people that don't like to wire their trees. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and effort to monitor your trees, and then removing the wire is even worse. So I don't think this is anybody's idea of enjoyment, but it's something that you need to do, and it's really important for the health of the trees to make sure that once the wire is set, to get that off the tree. There's a lot of times I get some questions from people who think that the wire is just something decorative or just as part of the bonsai styling or part of the traditional culture, but it's really, it serves a purpose. What we do is we put the wire on the trees, put those branches where we want them, and then in time that branch is going to stay there, so as soon as you take the wire off, that branch will hold exactly where you had put it. So there is a purpose for it, and this is not to be left on indefinitely. Once it serves its purpose, get this wire off as fast as you can. Now both of these trees are definitely very early stages of design, but they are good examples because there's a lot of open space where you can see that there's not a whole lot of foliage. This of course is a black pine, and this is the salicifolia that I used in my video for how to ship a bonsai. That was just a couple of weeks ago already, and the wire that I had put on was a small thin gauge, I think 1.5 millimeter wire, and it's already starting to dig in. So I just want to show exactly what it looks like when your wire is ready to be taken off. And ficus is something that grows so fast that it's you wire it, and really in just a couple of weeks that wire is ready to come back off, but the branches hold right where you plant them. In some situations I actually don't mind the wire actually digging into the tree or into the cambium, because I know in just a short amount of time the tree will heal over and the scars will go away. But there's some trees that you can't let that occur. Black pine is one of them. If you let these trees scar, they are going to, that scar is going to be on there for a very long time, and it's going to be very difficult to hide that damage to the tree. So this is the kind of trees that you want to monitor as best you can. Now this wire has been on this tree for probably 6 months, maybe even longer. It's a slow growing tree, so it's not like it's something that's going to dig in immediately. There's a couple ways you can take it off. The first way is to just unwind it the same way you put it on. You can see it started to dig in just a little bit. This is probably the perfect timing to get this off there, but nothing so deep that it's not going to heal over. So the easiest way, and I don't take it all the way up if it's you kind of have to remember the way you put it back on, and just unwind it the same way. Now there's a lot of times when you're going to have a lot of foliage on your tree, and getting this off without damaging the tree is pretty important, because there's times when you're unwinding the wire and it's if it's cut in or if it's been on for a long time, as you're unwinding you're actually going to unwind some of the cambium and actually damage the tree pretty bad. And there's a lot of times when you'd wired it, the branch is pretty thin, and now that it's grown thicker and more substantial, as you're unwinding, it's going back to that really thin wind, which means that the tree is actually going to be very weak. So in those cases, it's actually better if you just cut the wire off. And wire cutters, is something I talked about before, have this blunt edge. It's not sharp, so what you can do is you can actually get in close to the cambium, make that cut, and it's not going to cut the tree, it's just going to cut the wire. And this stuff makes perfect wire for putting the screening into your bonsai pots. So I usually keep nice little stacks of this stuff, and if you get good enough lengths, you can reuse the wire. Wire seems to be getting more and more expensive. I know my costs have gone up greatly over the past couple years, so it's something you want to use over and over again if you can. So that's the nice thing about the aluminum wire. It doesn't get rigid like the copper wire does. So definitely going to keep a good hold of this. Now there are times also that once you take the wire off, the limb may go back into the position it was, but you're already cutting in. You're just going to have to rewire that branch again, but this time to make it a little bit looser so that it doesn't dig in completely. But you got to get it to hold the branch. The whole purpose you're doing this is to get that branch stabilized and put in the position that you want, and that's exactly what you want to do. So there it is, no damage done to that branch. Came off very nicely, and looks like I'm going to be doing a little bit more wiring on this tree in the future once I figure out which branches I'm going to use as the basis for the tree. Now for the ficus, totally different situation. So the wire has started to dig in already. Like I said, this has only been on for a couple of weeks, but with the new growth and the new foliage all over this tree really starting to develop, it's put a lot more nutrients and a lot more energy through the tree, which is going to make this branch a lot thicker. So for a small wire like this, definitely get it off as fast as you can. You don't want this stuff to dig in any further, because that's really like a tourniquet, or it's really strangling the tree. but you can see that the indentions already are right there. And if I had I left it on a little bit longer, it would have really dug in, and as I would have removed this, parts of the cambium would have came off, and it would have made this branch very, very weak. But you can see as I take the wire off, branch stays exactly where it's supposed to. And this tree was really just wired just to open up the top of the tree. A lot of these branches were growing straight up, and I just wanted to get them down and out of the way so that I can get more growth near the top of the tree, close in. I don't want a whole lot of growth on the tips of my branches. I really want to get close to the trunk where it's going to be something I can work with, and in time when I do wire this tree out to get the good structure, it's going to wire out perfectly. And one last piece. It also never fails when you're trying to unwire or take the wire off a tree. You always tend to forget some, and then you notice it a few months later and go, oh my gosh, look, it's totally dug into the tree. At that point, it's only so much you can do. Hopefully it's not a substantial branch or a branch that's really going to be noticeable, and hopefully you're working with material that's going to hide that scar in time. It's really important to know what kind of tree you're working with so that you know how long to leave the wire on. Simply, a visual check is generally enough to keep up with it, but when you get a full dense canopy on it, it's hard to actually see how the wire's doing, and you tend to forget about it sometimes when you're just looking at the overall beauty of the tree. But for ficus and kinds of tropicals, especially during the growing season, really check those more frequently than your slow-growing, black pines or your Procomans dana or anything like that. That's a real slow-growing, more textured bark. Those ones are going to take a little bit longer for the wire to set the branches. But you need to really pay attention to those, after maybe 3 to 6 months or maybe even longer. To know the material you're working with, it's really going to help you keep up with your trees. And I know that nobody really enjoys this portion of taking care of the trees, but it's something you got to do. And with the proper tools, it makes the job a lot simpler.